trouble the water. God's gonna trouble the water.
We have gathered together with ancestors and descendants and the many, many wonderful citizens of this community and this city who remember the Pearl. May this story renew our energy and our spirits for the work of building just and equitable communities wherever we are. I would like to introduce now David Smith, who took on the mantle of the Pearl Coalition, founded by his late grandfather, Lloyd D. Smith. We honor the work of the Pearl Coalition and its vision, and we look forward to continued work together. David.
Good evening, everybody. So until we address the original sins of this country, we're going to continue to have this conversation. So I call everyone here as we remember the Pearl and the 77 brave men and women that were some of the most educated and highly sought after people for human bondage and trafficking in this country at that time, that were facing very similar challenges for human beings in this country right now today. And one of the things that was prevalent that got the churches involved during that time that was outrageous was the idea that these young ladies, specifically Mary and Emily Edmondson, would be used in the slave trade for breeding. And I want to, hopefully that hits you in a place that's personal, because right now on our borders we have those conditions. Right now in Baltimore and every port in this country, we have people being human trafficked right now because we have not dealt with the evil, immoral, unethical heart of greed. And greed has no measure. Only fear can compete with greed, and I don't want either of those where I am. So I say, as you remember this Pearl story, that know that the challenges then are the challenges we have now. And then they came together across faiths, across socioeconomic lines, across race. They funded Nat Turner and John Brown. And Harper's Ferry, and the Pearl Escape. These things are connected like a spider web. We must do it again.
As I was walking over here, okay, in the wind, I was thinking that these folks were on a sailboat. And so everything depended upon the wind. And if the wind turns around, you're lost, which was what happened to them. I was very impressed by, I was on this committee that wrote this stuff and organized this, and I don't know how it happened, but I am the designated anthropologist. And another member of the committee, Audrey Hinton, my neighbor, asked Colbert King to write an article for the Washington Post, and I was struck by how he took this event from 1848 and brought it up to right now today. And he connected the whole issue of voter suppression to the effort of the 77 people on the Pearl to escape from bondage. And one of the things I loved about what he wrote was that he talked about the Pearl as something that should be a symbol for us now and going forward. As a cultural anthropologist, I can think about stuff and ask questions that are not perhaps logical. I have no idea why the boat was called the Pearl. And the advantage of not knowing why the boat was called the Pearl is that I could reflect on what is a pearl. And so I thought about, well, what's a pearl? I don't know. How does a pearl get created? Where is a pearl? So pearls are inside oysters. It's not something you can see. It's something that's hidden. So obviously the planning for the fact that these 77 people got together on the 15th of April in 1848, they planned that hiding. But then, why don't we know this story? Why is this story of the Pearl, this significant story of African descendants seeking freedom in the capital of the United States, why don't we know it? That's part of many other hidden stories. C.R. Gibbs talked about the fact that at 7th and Independence, there was a slave pen. So all around us, there is a geography that reflects the enslavement of African Americans in the capital of the United States. And so I think that when I think about pearls, the pearls, right? But a pearl is the result of an irritant inside the oyster or another mollusk, and the host secretes a substance around this pearl in order to protect itself from the irritant. Well, these African descendants who were trying to escape were an irritant in the body of enslavement, and they were part of the provocation for the ending of enslavement fewer than 2 decades later. Now, what's interesting to me in this whole ending of enslavement in D.C. is that word that we don't really get highlighted, compensated emancipation, okay? And that's what tomorrow's about, right? The 16th, compensated emancipation. Well, what that means is that the owners of enslaved people were compensated for the loss of their human property. So yes, there was emancipation. But in D.C., the owners of enslaved people got $300 per enslaved person, and the only way in which one of these enslaved people could get anything financial out of the process, they could get paid to leave the district. So I think that when we think about what's going on right now, H.R. 40, right, reparations, well, we need to think about that in terms of the cash involved. So the enslavers were compensated for the loss of people who had worked, who had enriched them for hundreds of years. And so when we think about studying the issue of reparations, we need to think about this issue of compensated emancipation. And there's so much more to say, and I would love to say more about this. And I like to think that what we are doing here and now is the beginning. And I'm hearing, yes, from our instigator, Reverend Ruth. And so from now on, I like to think that this is going to be part of what one learns in school as opposed to what is continuing to be hidden, like those pearls, those elements of value, just like African descendants were the most valuable commodity traded in the Atlantic world. So now it's up to us to make this story known. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheila. And the green rose was used to signal other members or acknowledge or identify other members of the Underground Railroad in the Quakers in Maryland and I think a little bit in Pennsylvania. And also it was meant to identify the outside, and the real green rose looks like this.
The story is very personal to me. About 10 years ago, I found a photo, or my family let me know that there existed a photo of my great-great-grandfather who was born into slavery. He was never a slave. He was always a person, and he was held in slavery. And I think about him often, and I seek to always restore his dignity and restore the dignity of all of my enslaved family, and indeed the enslaved families in America who never really were able to reach their potential because their personhood and human dignity were denied. I feel like we are now beginning to turn a corner and really begin to understand the meaning of our nation's original sin.
So this is the beauty of Southwest. So you just sort of look around. This is the beauty of it. This is the beauty. It's diverse, but it's conscious and working towards common goals. We will now have a poem commissioned.
I have been commissioned by the ancestors beyond the veil that hangs between the living and departed to speak to you. Their voices are restless. do not forget their lessons. They see how you turn your heads, avert your eyes when you chance upon images from those dark times. They sense the shame that beats within your breast to descend from such as these. Why shame? It took strength. Oh, you say you wouldn't have done it. Too much fight in you. Mark, their words and laws controlled your world, buried or faced death, or worse. There are worse things. Death into sufferings. Some call for our extinction. We bled so you of tomorrow would not have to bleed. Lest they try to write us out of their history, we would not die but survive, so they could not lead us out. Our stripes spared you yours. Are you ashamed of your Jesus who bore the anguish of the cross for your sins? Bearing is an act of love. It was love for our people launched into the future. Our willingness to endure brought you here today. No shame to it, but glory. Thank you.
Yes.
We're going to say their names. We have lighted 77 luminarias to represent their lives, their personhood, their dignity, their loves and their joys and their sorrows. The Edmondson siblings, Ephraim, Richard, John, Samuel, Mary, and Emily.
A girl named Ellen.
Priscilla Queen and 2 children.
John and Peter Rick.
The poem that I selected was written by Frances Ellen Watkins Harper in 1864. We just heard the name of the Freedom Seekers, and this poem I selected because it talks about the aspiration of the Freedom Seekers. The title of the poem is Bury Me in a Free Land. I'm going to put this down. Make me a grave where'er you will, in a lowly plain or a lofty hill. Make it among earth's humblest graves, but not in a land where the men are slaves. I could not rest if around my grave I heard the steps of a trembling slave. His shadow above my silent tomb would make it a place of fearful gloom. I could not rest if I heard the tread of a coffle gang to the shambles led, and a mother's shriek of wild despair rise like a curse on the trembling air. I could not sleep if I saw the lash drinking her blood with each fearful gash. I'd shudder and start if I heard the bay of bloodhounds seizing their human prey. If I saw young girls from their mother's arms bartered and sold for their youthful charms. I ask no monument, proud and high, to arrest the gaze of passers-by. All that my yearning spirit craves is bury me not in a land of slaves.
Good evening, friends and neighbors. We have been a part of a Washington, D.C. story and certainly a Southwest story. For us to keep active, to teach, and to share until it's known by everyone.
Remember.
The pearl.
Remember.
The pearl.
Remember.
The pearl.
Ashe.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Steal away, to Jesus, still away home. I ain't got long to stay here, my Lord.